let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're continuing our dinner table talk series. Today we are talking meat and more meat. So what exactly does that mean?
We're continuing our talks. We are talking today about muscle gaining. We've had the fantastic, formerly known as sobearcub, now the Captain Barra on the program before. They're going to be rejoining us today, along with a litany of other fantastic, biffy, delicious, muscle-bound guests. And we're going to have them all introduce themselves right now.
I'm Dusty. AKA Capy, also AKA thiccster.
Bill, on Grommr, I am B with BII, because I don't think no one knows how to pronounce it. On Instagram, I'm bigerbii.
And my name is Indigo. All my socials, at least where the main socials are that you can find me, are indigothehimbo. That's on Instagram, TikTok, Grommr, all of them.
And once again, hi everyone, nice to be back. I'm formerly sobearcub, although that is my Grommr handle, and currently the Captain Barra on Instagram.
Well, lads, welcome to the show. Great to have you all. Very excited to come into this discussion. This discussion actually came about because Capy had a conversation with us about wanting to have an opportunity to really explore muscle gaining, because as we often say on the podcast, every guest is a revolution, because it's the first time people really have the opportunity to hear perspectives from diverse members of the community who do different things. And certainly speaking as like a stock standard gainer, muscle gainers have always been a little bit of a mystery to me. Other than the whole beef aspect, it's always like, what do they do? Do they like trade secrets? And I don't know, when they go to the bar, do they do shots of protein powder? Like, I don't know. So as a first off, how does everyone identify in terms of identities like muscle gainer, bodybuilder, dad bod, etc.?
Generally, I just identify as a gainer, although I was trying to work out before I gave up on it. I loathe working out, so right now I just sort of identify as a gainer, dad bod. I'm thick enough now that I just kind of fit into that.
I identify as a gainer or muscle gainer. I try to gain both muscle and chub. So
I'd have to say it's definitely been muscle gainer for the longest time. It used to be bodybuilder for a couple years, but now I'm more of like the strict muscle gainer slash powerlifter slash himbo slash beef person.
I would fall into the muscle gainer power builder category. I focus on building my strength. I do want a bigger body, though lately I've been on a cutting diet. It's been interesting to see the scale go down, but to see my muscle be more pronounced, to be more 3D. I've been working on that for about 2 years, but I've been lifting since I was 23 and I'm currently 40.
Yes, and for myself, I definitely identify as muscle gainer, aka bodybuilding on my own terms.
I like that. It's a really interesting array of terms. I feel like something someone described to me recently was kind of like this idea of being like a meatball. And that just makes me think of like, someone deliciously round, made of meat, drizzled in like a light barbecue sauce. And that sounds like a man whose flesh I'd sink my teeth into. So I'm down with that. So look, I appreciate getting to know this idea of who everyone is, how people position themselves in terms of identity and labels. I want to ask, like, what have been some of yours like early inspirations and that initial kernel, that desire, that root to grow?
I stumbled across a muscular development magazine. It was in the house for some reason. I don't really know. I guess one of my uncles owned it. And I would have to say, as far as an inspiration, I probably didn't know his name at the time, but I found out much later on it was Lee Priest. He was just huge, and he's like 5'4", and like it just looked amazing, and I became captivated by it. And you see the stuff in the background. I read a lot of comic books. Like just it just looks so awesome in like the action, and it's also like just the pose too. Like you're just this huge thing, but it's like kind of stunning and elegant in its own way too, I guess. I can't really describe it any other way. But later, as I went on and discovered the work that was involved, I wasn't sure if it was something that I could do until I actually started doing it. And it's been such a surprising thing that I've been able to make the accomplishments that I've been able to make.
As far as early inspirations for me, I too was a victim of the muscular development / men's fitness magazines back in the day. Early, like, why do I feel this tingling sensation looking at these people? But later, it didn't hit me later on until I started getting into strongman when I was like 18. Because my brothers were these thin athletic types that were playing soccer and actually good at it versus me, who was this, big kid running on the field who was terrible at it. And so when I decided I wanted to get into something, I was like, oh, World's Strongest Man is really cool to watch. Look at these big guys lifting heavy shit, and it looks so cool. And I actually got into it, and I competed a bit. And so I actually did a lot of stuff back then for that. So that's what kind of got me into it.
For me, I don't think there was anybody inspirational in the beginning, just kind of a general desire to grow muscle. It was definitely lean muscle at first, trying to get the abs and big arms, and I didn't want to get any sort of chub on me or whatever. But then I ran across a post on Tumblr in like 2015 of a guy called Meatball. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of him. His name's Gabe, and it showed his transformation from like a little guy, and then he like started gaining muscle, and then started doing powerlifting, and then he got like a belly going on, and I'm like, I really, really want to do that. And then I kind of fell down a hole on Tumblr, and discovered more and more of these types of transformations. So that's kind of where I went.
And for myself, as I mentioned before on my episode, coming across Warren Davis cartoons, of course, was very influential for me. If you don't know what those are, feel free to look them up. You might be fascinated. In addition to that, though, I have to, like, in reflecting on this, a lot of 90s cartoons had a lot of like rapid like body transformation type things. In particular, like Johnny Bravo, fascinating stuff. Gaston is, we're talking like Disney things, and I also talked about Gaston on the other episode, plugging the pod. And actually, as I fell down my own Tumblr rabbit hole at one point, Dusty, I saw your transformation, and that was very inspirational to me.
Same, gotta say same.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
This is something that we haven't necessarily had much opportunity to kind of talk about on the pod before, but it's something that I think this like generational influence that kind of came up in conversation, like for example with Lupita Nyong'o talking about how the inspiration of Black women in cinema is really a very thin line. Lupita was inspired by Whoopi, who was inspired by, and I forget her name, but she played in the original Star Trek series, Uhura. So,
Nichelle Nichols.
And then even she was only inspired by, I can see her face, but I cannot remember her name. She won the Oscar.
For which movie?
Gone with the Wind.
Oh, Hattie McDaniels.
So, it's like that. It's such a short lineage of like people who inspire people from the very moment that someone first stepped forward and said, I refuse to be in the shadows about who I am and what I do. So Dusty, who was inspired by Meatball, and then Cap and Indigo, who were inspired by Dusty, it's this really awesome thing where I think for the first time on the pod, we get to see this kind of generational influence. And I guess as a kind of pivot to a question here, for all of y'all, have any of you otherwise experienced an example of someone saying to you that your journey has inspired them, and what does that do for you as an individual on your journey?
Well, I will say that a lot of people like it's I've been on various places, either TikTok or Facebook, like through Facebook Just Friends or Instagram or something. I became really big into posting about my fitness a lot, and my changes and all that stuff. And so many people just have told me like, oh, because of your commitment to this, it's making me want to do something as well. And it's a weird feeling sometimes because one, then you're like, okay, well, that means I'm gonna have to keep doing this, aren't I? And like I can't stop now. And two, it kind of makes you think about how you want to present yourself, because now that I'm in that I want to kind of be big brick wall person phase of my fitness, when I used to be like this, like, oh, lean bodybuilder kind of person, it's like, okay, well, the people still think the same way, or will they think, oh, what happened to him, kind of thing, And so a lot of you like it, but at the same time, then you're like, oh, people are noticing me. Oh God, why'd you have to notice me? Because now if I want to do something else, you're probably going to think of something different of me. And so at least that's what goes through my mind.
Same for me. I think when people started saying, oh, like you've inspired me or whatever, it's been rewarding, and like I'm glad to help people or motivate people or inspire people. But at the same time, yeah, it's like you really have to think that like there's all these people paying attention to what you're doing, and like pressure to keep going, and it can be a little stressful. And then yeah, like if you want to go a different direction, you are definitely thinking like, oh, all these people are going to be upset now or whatever. So yeah, it's been different.
I really haven't had anyone say that they feel inspired by me or, anything like that, like I was their motivation. But like all of you have been probably showing your face online with your accounts for a much longer amount of time than I have. I've only been showing my face online for like the past 4 years. I don't know if that really makes a difference, but when you work out day after day, you go 5, sometimes 6 days a week, sometimes your weight goes up. Like if you're on the more gainery side, like I've been as heavy at 5'6", sometimes 5'7", as 265. And I'm now at a very low of 214, and nobody really ever acknowledges the changes in my body. And granted, with, the human malware thing that we had a couple years ago, I've had to change gyms a couple times. So it's not like I see the same people in my gyms. I've also moved to them, like, even though it's just 9 miles, it's all different people. And it's still, when I see coworkers every day and it's like, I've gone down or up in shirt size, pants size, whatever, and no one says anything, it can be kind of hard to stay motivated. But that's when you have to like really clap for yourself. But I don't know how I would react if someone said that they were motivated by me, but I I think I might actually cry out of joy because finally I'm getting some acknowledgement in real life, because even online, if I do get like the compliments and everything, it's just not as like real, just seeing things typed to you. Because with Instagram, I get like, I probably only answer maybe 1 out of 10 messages that I get, because a lot of them are just, hey, or OMG, you're so hot. Like, it's thanks, but how do I really start a conversation with that? Or it's pictures that I'm not exactly open to getting as a conversation breaker, but thank you just the same. But that's kind of where what my experience has been. But since showing my face, though, I do find I get more positive reaction. So it's not, I think people are just more drawn when they can see the whole picture rather than when you're just doing this, because they at least know who they're talking to or who they may have a conversation with is the actual person and not just someone. I'm just going to say catfishing, but we've all been there talking to a headless profile, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and I think it's extremely valid, especially in this community. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've been followed by about 3 fake Dusties, because okay, first of all, catfish, you're gonna get found out. Second of all, why are you gonna go around pretending like you are someone that recognizable? Like, no one's going to see through my cunning disguise. Like, come on, dude. Like that. Not even convincing, but that's by the by. I think something interesting, Bill, that you kind of centered in on there is that there's this essence of we live in such a very specific world that's right in front of us, and you can step, like you say, 9 miles away, and it's a complete change of scenery, and you're in the same town, And sometimes I think when it comes to what we do, whether it's the muscle side, the fat side, or both, we can get so caught up in our own little community that we can feel like if things change, it can be so permanent, but actually you can just pivot a little bit to the left and actually you can keep on pushing and not have to worry all too much. But I want to kind of zoom in as well. You mentioned something about like that nature of lifting. And I think it might be interesting to zero in with y'all. Like what was that impetus of lifting for you guys? As in like, where did you learn to kind of like lift and build the way that you'll have learned to do that?
For myself, I was very much self-taught, but thankfully had a lot of really great people that I could ask for advice, whether it was on Instagram or friends. I have some friends who have gotten into bodybuilding and personal training since college, and so it was great to kind of automatically have a little bit of a built-in community of people that I could ask about different things. But YouTube is an excellent resource. Some of my favorite channels that I learned the most from were Jeff Nippard Fitness. He's a really great Canadian guy who competes but also does training. Ryan Humiston, who's a little fat phobic but has a lot of really helpful things to say. And also it's cringy, but Buff Dudes. They cover their basics, and during the pandemic, they had a lot of really great dumbbell videos, and a lot of us only had a dumbbell and a bench at home, if that even. So
I'm gonna add Alan Thrall to that mix just because Alan Thrall is also really good. He's changed a lot too. Side note, he in his earlier videos he's this big strong man, but now he's like this lean runner type. It's crazy, but he went through a huge body transformation as well.
For me, I think I started out going with a couple friends, and we kind of, people that knew what they were doing a little bit. And then when I ventured out on my own and really got serious about it, I would use like muscleandfitness.com. They posted workouts. And then I think bodybuilding.com used to post some workouts. And then more recently, I've been getting them from Instagram, or just making it my own because I've been doing it for like over 10 years. But there's a guy on there that I follow, Alex Bazanovsky, I think that's how you say it. But he posts some amazing workouts, and they're really good. They really wear me out, and they're kind of creative. I like them. So yeah, I've been following his workouts for probably 3 or 4 years now. So
I got started. I actually ordered out of a comic book the Charles Atlas body weight exercises. It was like $30. I did that religiously for a very long time. I just couldn't afford to go to a gym, or I didn't believe I could afford to go to the gym. Once I had like a more steady job and was able to like pay for things myself, I joined a Gold's Gym, which was awesome. Then what was it? I discovered, as Dusty had mentioned, the rabbit hole of Tumblr. I discovered bodybuilding.com, in particular the forums, but there were so many articles then, and like I just sat and read them, and I was so like into it. Even before I started going to the gym, I was just studying all these exercises and just trying to learn, and just enjoying watching them a little bit too much. And and for now, I feel like as Dusty has said, I've been doing it for so long. If I see like this new cool exercise, I'm like, how many different ways can you really do a curl? It's a curl is a curl. Like, yeah, how you position your hands may vary and hit the muscle, and you can feel the difference, but no matter how many different names the basic curl may have, it's still you're doing curls, But as far as making up routines, I just, whatever I feel is working me and I feel like, yeah, that hit me right, that's what I typically will go with.
By the way, I love how you mentioned Charles Atlas, because I don't know shit about Charles Atlas except for that one song from Rocky Horror where he's like, "In just 7 days, I will make you a man." So that's my contribution to the world of muscle gaining. You're welcome. No, I love hearing this because it's so interesting. Again, that spectrum of people who've had a number of years to really kind of get into it, and I like that element you guys say about how you become so familiar with it that it's like, oh, well, how many ways can I put a variation on this? I'm a bit like that with cooking, like that, or at least that's how I'd relate to it. Like you get to a point of going, I know how to add calories to this. It's very easy, like butter, cream, oil, and just whatever. But then you get to a point where it's like a recipe is a recipe. I don't need it. I have ingredients. Like how can I combine certain things to make the flavors better? How can I add calories in a way that, makes it more like calorie dense and maybe get some macros up if I'm particularly feeling like I need more protein or something. But also, how can I make the flavor and the texture like really, really nice and like make it more of a proper thing and kind of make it perfect for me rather than like what someone else with a recipe happens to think is the correct approach, So I guess for those of you all who have been at this, maybe I suppose longer than others, but let's put this out there to everyone. From the time in which you started doing the thing to now, how has your training and diet styles shifted?
Well, a lot. I remember when I even first started doing weightlifting when I was 18, 19 and doing strongman and stuff. It was all about just eating in general. And, when you're that young, I didn't have an idea of like what I was supposed to be eating. I just knew, I need to eat, in order to lift heavy thing, need to eat. And that's what I did. And so I actually got like pretty heavy at some point. I was in like at the 230s at some point. But it worked. You're supposed to be big when you're lifting like stones and pulling trucks. But after that, I got into, and after I fell out of it and the weight didn't really mean much to me anymore, I got into the whole like, I need to be thin and small and stuff like that. And, because, childhood baggage and all that crap. But when I actually started weightlifting, I actually started looking into more about how I'm supposed to be weightlifting again. Like this is around 2018 when I started getting back into it really strictly. I started looking into how I'm supposed to be eating. And so I, a good amount, like I meal prepped a lot, and it was, it's definitely a chore sometimes to do that. And when I started working with my bodybuilding coach, he basically reeled back my eating because I was eating too much, it seems, based on my goals at the time. And so it's changed a lot over time, just up and down, but I have an idea of how my body reacts to food for the most part now. And it's kind of more, I'm eating a lot more now, but it's still not like, and it's very methodical still for me, but I'm just learning to kind of let go a little bit and to still enjoy food, because sometimes when you're on that strict of a diet, you kind of learn to not enjoy food, and it's not the best.
So my first job was at a GNC, which I don't even think they're in business anymore because I don't see them around anywhere. So I think I made kind of the mistake a lot of people that go to the gym made. I thought, I'll lift the heavy weight, I'll take the IT supplement, and I'll drink the protein drink, and that's all I'm going to need is just that protein drink. But, in the past several years, I have really learned a lot about how to eat and how to, as I mentioned, I was as heavy as 265. I was on their Dreamer bulk. If there was food in front of me, I saw food, I ate it. That was my diet. I thought I was eating all this protein. I think when my one boss who I really liked, like as a person, mistook me for this guy who was just like skinny fat, but very fat. Like he had a big belly, but we were the same height. And I never really cared about having a belly, but I go to the gym and I work out. I wanted my muscles to be noticed, not being mistaken for this overweight older guy. And that was kind of like, all right, I've always been the chubbier guy, so let me lose weight. I downloaded an app to my phone just to track my calories, and I kept my protein high. And there are certain things that you eat that it's like, oh, I mean, an orange, everyone says oranges are good for you. It's like all these carbs. You just don't even realize that, oh my God, you know. And even if you tell yourself, you know, oh, well, it's natural sugar, it should be good for you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying it's not, you know, I started learning how to cut back. And I actually had to stop using the app because I felt like I was developing an eating disorder, because I would just be like, no, I can't eat this because I'm only going to let myself have 2,200 calories today. And, you know, do I still use protein powders? Yes. Because as you had mentioned, with, you know, how can I add calories? How can I meet macros? Yes, for certain things, I do use it. Like I take a small container of powder with me to the gym, so I have it afterwards. I only really use 1 scoop a day. When I was bulking and trying to like maintain being at 230, I was making overnight oats. So I was putting a scoop of protein into there to get it up to 40 grams of protein in that one meal, along with the yogurt, the milk, and everything else. But still, like, it's still a learning process. But, you know, I've never really been one into eating vegetables. And with my dinner tonight, I had steamed broccoli just because, like, it's better for you. Like, you know, some of the eating habits that we learn when we're living at home with our parents and families, you know, I grew up in a somewhat Italian household, pasta, 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 nothing but pasta every day, to the point where I was excited for meatloaf. She made pasta so much. But one of the things, though, that as far as the food goes, is just learning when I can eat, when I'm at the latest I should eat, you know, because if you eat too late, it can, for me at least, give me acid reflux. But yeah, learning how to cook for yourself and what meals work, and tracking calories to where you don't necessarily need the app, but it's good to use, could be, it's kind of approximate because who knows what's really in it, you know, is very, very important if you're trying to get a desired body.
Yeah, and much like Indigo and B, for me at first it was very much like, oh, you want to be big, so you got to lift big and then you got to eat big. And so it went from kind of like a fire hose approach down to more like a garden hose approach, down to more like a, you know, water gun. It got more and more precise as I learned more about what I needed and you know, about macros really, and that was a big game changer for me. Living alone, it was pretty easy to once I finally got myself to do it, just start kind of tracking everything in an Excel spreadsheet, and, you know, going for like this many grams of protein per day, this many carbs. And right, because I'm not really concerned with being small, the carbs were never the issue, but honestly getting the protein numbers together was really essential for me to start seeing progress.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat when I first started. I was doing calorie counting, and I was doing the macros, like if it fits your macros, protein, carbs, and fat. And I was very, very precise about it. I would do the bulking phase and then the cutting phase, and try to have like really good abs for summer and bulk up in the winter. And no matter how hard I tried, my abs didn't show through like I wanted them to. And it was just way too much work. And that's kind of the time that I decided to get bigger and like gain the belly and everything. And then at that point, it was whatever I could fit in my mouth, you know, like it doesn't matter. Just get to like 4,000 calories a day or whatever. And then it got up to like 5,000. And yeah. So ever since then, yeah, it's just as much as I can eat really. And then of course I've been using protein the whole time because of the lifting. And now I make my own gainer shakes. So
just to kind of touch base a little bit on what B was saying before with potentials of disordered eating, this is something that comes up a lot when it comes to, I think, both muscle gaining and regular gaining, because at the end of the day, we all trying to get big, and there is something to be said about the nature of like queerness in general. The gay community is currently experiencing, whether you might call that particular element muscle gaining or not, queerness in general is experiencing this like uptick in like fucking everybody's getting jacked and everybody's sticking things in places, and it's all happening. So like, as a quick kind of addressing of that, I do think it's good to ask, like, for y'all, how are y'all doing when it comes to managing the potentials around disordered eating and finding that fine line with the goals that you're setting for yourselves?
I'll jump right in. So growing up, I didn't. Well, I'll jump right in. Growing up, as B was mentioning, you learn certain things from your family, and that just seems normal. You don't question it. But later on, as you go about your life, you might realize, oh, well, why am I not like this? Or why do I look this certain way? Or when I'd like to look another way. And I had a pretty dark chapter at one point in undergrad where I was in a bad relationship and I was anorexic. And I'm happy to say that since then I've gained 130 pounds. And that's pretty crazy, but that's more than anything a testament to how friggin' small I was back then. Now I sometimes encounter the opposite extreme where it's like I feel sick. So I'm like, oh, I'm not big enough. But having community helps, and having friends you can talk to about these things helps. Thank you, Tim and James. And I've kind of started to figure out with my on my own, but also with my close-knit community, how to begin to question those sorts of intrusive thoughts and feelings, and to realize that, yeah, well, it might bother you. Okay, do something about it, but don't let it ruin your day, and that was a really important step for me as far as my journey thus far.
So I'm kind of curious about something. All of you have talked about how you started off at a smaller point, and now you're all larger than where you had began. How have people treated you since your body transformation? Like in your personal life, your professional life, are people treating you like very different, or who pointed out what, and like what was what was their reaction?
Well, I've gone through a gamut of change. So when I was younger, I was bigger, and then I became thinner, and then I got bigger again, and then thinner, and now I'm big again. It's weird. I've gone up and down. But I will say that, and this is the thing, growing up, and this is in relation to the food thing, I never had that much of a bad relationship with food, because I never had my mom or anyone tell me like, oh, you're too big. My mom is actually a very much a feeder person, because she's like, oh, you want some food? Here, let me get you some food. And she's very much that. Like when I go home, she's like, are you hungry? Do you want me to get you something? And I'm like, I just ate, Mom. It's fine. And so she might as well be a feeder. But anyway, but ultimately, I do know, especially when I started going into the gym like 5 years ago, like intensively, and especially when I started getting leaner and stuff like that, the amount of attention shifts a lot. And especially because they perceive you as the socially thin now, or socially acceptable body. And so it's not that I would ever have people just totally ignore me before, but it definitely, it's noticeable.
For me, I started out really skinny, and of course I didn't get a whole lot of attention at that point, and that's maybe one of the reasons why I started wanting muscle, so I could be more attractive to other guys. And then as I built up the muscle, I started getting more attention, and it was awesome. But I think a lot of it was very shallow, of course. A lot of shallow people in that crowd. And then as I started bulking up, it's funny because I lost a lot of those shallow friends, and I didn't realize how shallow they were. And then, the bigger that I got, as I moved out of the conventional attractive zone into like having a belly, then the attention shifted from one group to another group. And now, they're like, oh, your belly is so great. Like, you're so big. And it's been interesting, but definitely get ignored by a lot more people than I used to, which was weird to get used to at first, but now it doesn't bother me at all. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, so similar kind of story. I feel like when you're a certain kind of thin, a lot of people are like, oh yay, and they celebrate that. And you get certain kind of attention from certain people, and then your body shifts and people are like, oh, are you okay? Are you depressed? Are you going through something? What's going on? I got that a lot from my family. They're like, oh, you're gaining weight. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm lifting. I'm fine. I'm more active than I've ever been, you know? And being in the community, it's been interesting seeing a shift from people ignoring me because I was too small to now giving me more attention because there's more of me. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic there, and one does have to be aware of who's a real friend and who's just, you know, there for the shits and the gigs. Especially, you know, it's like kind of like a fair weather situation at that point. So going on a journey like this teaches you a lot about who and what really matters.
When I first joined the Gold's Gym that I had mentioned earlier, I was 215 pounds and they took my body fat and it was at like almost 30%. I didn't realize how fat I was, but I didn't really do too much because I was really just at home a lot. I didn't drive, so I got on my bike to go everywhere. I had to pedal, you know, so that contributed to losing weight. I got down to 170, but then I thought I looked like a scrub because I was so tiny. So I started trying to gain weight. I got up to 190, tried my best, like breaking 200 again was very difficult. Then I gradually climbed over, like once I got into like my 30s, I just gradually climbed up. I mentioned my heaviest weight before. And then surprisingly losing it wasn't all that difficult just because I was minding what my diet was like. People never really acted any differently towards me. If anything, no matter what my weight was, I was always told that, you know, like when I was at home, but I had a negative family, they would just say, you're very lazy, you don't do anything, you're so fat, this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, gee, you know, I go to the gym like 5 days a week and they say you're doing it wrong. And I'm just like, you know, the biggest insult from them was my one aunt had gotten my cousin a membership so that she could use the tanning booths to help with her acne. And I had said hello on the way out. And, you know, they told me getting a car was the worst thing I could do for my body because now I'm going to get even fatter. After I had just been in the gym for an hour, it was so detrimental. I really found like online, people were a lot more positive to me. But like, as far as the body image goes and like the gatekeeping that was mentioned, you know, when I try to meet like local guys to work out with or have a relationship or whatever, you know, it's either I'm not serious enough, I'm not really about I don't do their diet like they do. There's some other things that I wasn't into that might come up later. But overall, it's like, if not for the online community, I may or may not have given up a while ago. It's just when I didn't work out for 2 years because of a job that I had that I was working 15-hour shifts, but I needed the money. I didn't go to the gym, and it was like this part of my life was very missing. And I would go very sporadically. Like I might go for 2 weeks and then work got in the way again. But nobody other like I've mentioned before, in real life really acknowledges what it is for me. It's only really online.
I was kind of lucky in one regard on my journey in that I went to school in 3 different places, one of which was in a different country. And I hadn't really been back in my home state basically since I left for high school. So people know me from different chapters of my life, but I haven't necessarily been in interaction with anybody as a constant except for my own family. So I think that's definitely been liberating in a way because people get to know me as where I'm at when they meet me, and then, you know, you can follow the adventures as they unfold online.
Sorry, don't mind me. The fan is off, but like we're having like weird heating things in the building, so the heating, even though we have it switched off, is like on full ball right now, and I'm just like, Mama is overheating. Also, like, nobody tells you that. You turn into a meatball, and then your body's like, how about, while getting bigger, you turn into a furnace? Would you like that? Tough shit. That is now your life. So this is me coming out as a half furnace creature.
Nobody warned me about the acid reflux.
Amen to that. Oh my God. That and the sweating, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh my
The
god.
hyperhidrolysis
Getting out of
or
breath,
hyperhidrosis. I can't remember which one it is.
getting out of breath trying to do my shoes or clip my toenails.
Oh
That
my God. Yeah. I nearly passed out trying to tie my shoes the other day.
girl, I bought a shoehorn and I'm like,
I'm going to have to do the same thing.
and that's on fat shit, period, sis.
Essential.
Yeah, that was kind of a turning point for me when I couldn't reach my backside, and then I was having trouble tying my shoes, like you guys had mentioned. The acid reflux, I kind of feel, is a little bit more diet oriented, because I had the acid reflux when I was eating pasta like all the time, and that wasn't really my choice. But when my body fat was higher, I had it. Now I haven't had it in years. I always just kind of blame the orange soda, but then through research, I found out, no, it was all that tomato sauce.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot.
Read me.
Oh, well, I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, there's a lot to be said for what you have, certainly. But then there's also like genetic predisposition to things. Like I've had to cut out like anything with oranges, anything with tomatoes. But unfortunately, I'm of the ilk that even my morning coffee will get me like acid refluxing.
See,
so
coffee doesn't do that to me, but like
that must
I've
be
noticed,
nice.
well, I've noticed
Some
it's
of
all the fatty foods that I eat. So like if I eat peanut butter, milk, dairy, cheese, yogurt, all that will cause it, because obviously I'm having some issues with my gallbladder. But you know, like nobody warns you that, hey, after like 35, shit's just gonna start going downhill. Like
Absolutely. And some of us are definitely luckier than others in those regards.
Wow, just at me.
I will say, since I started cooking for myself on the regular and making all my meals for myself, I cannot stomach fast food except for McDonald's and Arby's. Those are the only two places. Oh, well, Taco Bell doesn't really count because nobody can really stomach Taco Bell, but it doesn't make me as sick as, say, Wendy's or Burger King, etc.
yeah, I don't eat Taco Bell unless I'm drunk.
Yeah,
That's the only time I ever eat it.
I haven't had Taco Bell in the longest time for a while. I don't know. It's what, as far as fast food places go, when I actually end up having cravings for that, which is not often, like, cause one, like the macros that you get from that are always really off. And so like, as if I'm going to be, eating out, I want to eat like food. And so like, give me like, let me go somewhere else to actually make, even though it might be like, so give me an actual like burger from like Five Guys or something versus like McDonald's. I'd rather do that, if that makes sense.
could. I do have a question I want to ask, and this one may seem a little left of field. I'm curious to know from each of you, like, what has your journey been like in terms of your gender identity? Because I do feel like this is something like muscle, hypermasculinity, very that vibe, but also like, I don't know, like some people kind of go through that process and come out the other side more gender neutral and whoop-de-woo. So how has that been for y'all?
Yeah, I absolutely feel a sort of sense of, maybe not in terms of struggle, but something akin to solidarity with the trans community, as far as like having a journey with my body, having had it not where I wanted to, and later looking more the way I envisioned myself looking. Obviously, the oppression and what one faces are very, very different. But I found along the journey that I felt more and more comfortable in my masculinity and with my own body and in my own skin than I did when I was like super skinny. And back when I was super skinny, I was a little bit more kind of in the middle, more androgynous kind of vibe. And I don't know, it was where I was at, but I'm happier and I feel more, this feels more correct. And in talking about this, a meme comes to mind, because there's been all the anti-trans legislation and stuff on the news, and there's a meme that came up, or an infographic. Well, it's like somewhere between a meme and an infographic that's like asking the questions: have you gone to the gym? Do you drink protein shakes? Do you go on creatine? If so, you know, do you have a beard? These are all like gender affirming care in different ways. And so it's important to note that, you know, for some of us at least, this is a part of us kind of becoming perhaps a truer expression of ourselves, becoming more in line with the person we feel we are or should be, or even just showing people that we can.
Now, I do want to ask something a little potentially controversial. So, fats. Sorry. Well, I normally say fats. What do I call it? Meatballs? Is that the collective noun for a bunch of muscle gainers? Meatballs? Fuck it, we're going with it. Meatballs, strap on in. Steroids, silicone, synthol. These are obviously materials, shall we say. There are questions, there are experiences. There have been things, perhaps, in the last few years involving some of those substances that many people might have questions about and concerns and all sorts of things. So, from all of y'all in attendance, discuss.
I mentioned that I worked at GNC. So, you know, I thought pop the pill, this will work, blah, blah, blah. There was one supplement that was very big in my gym. It was called The One. It was made by this company, Applied Nutraceuticals. And it really worked. Like, not only did my body fat go down, but I got bigger, I got stronger, and then it got taken off the market. And what was interesting about it was, you know, you buy 2 bottles of it, you had to. It says take this amount for this amount of time, and then you have to take this smaller bottle. And I don't know whether I was naive because it was like the first thing I ever took, but it got pulled off the market because the compound inside, when it went into your body, broke in half, and it was steroids. So I actually did a cycle of steroids without knowing it, but they re-released it as free test, and it's somewhat different. I don't know. I didn't try it because I was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But within the past couple of years, I have used SARMs, which I guess falls into the steroids category, we'll say. Just because what I can achieve naturally, I don't feel is enough for me. But I will say to you, though, to anyone who hears this, you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve just taking the pill, taking, whatever chemical into your body. You have to learn how to eat. You have to learn how to train for you. And if you don't know how to train for you, if you don't know how to eat right, no matter what chemical you put into your body, once it's out of your body, the effect wears off. You're just going to be dissatisfied in an endless loop of chasing after what only that chemical can give you. But you have to ask yourself, do you really want to do that to yourself? Because the SARMs to a degree, but even back then, when I took it, I thought I hurt my back. But after taking the SARMs, which can some level of toxicity to your body, it can mess up your very vital organs, such as your liver and kidneys. And supplements in general are very difficult for your body to, process and push through, where you can, the C4 energy drinks have beta alanine in them. I cannot drink them. It will mess me up. So yes, I have used, I wouldn't consider myself enhanced because I'm so much lighter now, and I don't feel like I'm at a point in my growth where I'm bigger than I could have been naturally. But do I consider using them again? Yeah, because ordinary isn't really enough for me, and that's not how I see myself. I'm an ace individual, so I don't really think about my masculinity, really. Do I enjoy when my eggplant is very firm? Yes, absolutely. Because I do like to dance. It does make me feel a certain way. But I've been able to grow a beard since I was like 11. I've always had a goatee. Like, this beard that I have now is just a new look for me. I will never be clean shaven. And I guess that's just how I feel masculine. But I never really thought about it before, because to me, you were masculine if you had something between your legs that hung out. So that's all but yeah, don't do those things until you're sure you're ready.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm not natty. I definitely put in a lot of work and time in the gym before I went down that road, naturally. And then, yeah, I guess it just depends on what your goals are, and that's what I needed to get where I am. I would have been way smaller without additional supplementation. So, yeah.
So I've only done one cycle, and I did it back in 20 at the end of 2021 into 2022. And it was I had put in a lot of work at that point, and I had been thinking about it for the whole time. And actually, the only reason I didn't do it sooner was because my partner was vehemently against it. And one time I just asked them on a random time, and I said, so like, I've been thinking about this again. And they're like, so they recalled saying like, you've given me a lot of trust on a lot of things. So I feel I can give you trust on this because I know you don't want to fuck up our relationship. So as long as you're safe with it, you're fine. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so then there's this one person that was at the gym, that's at the gym that I go to. It was a wealth of information, and he helped me start my first cycle, and I did it. It was not a bad experience. It was basic testosterone. It wasn't anything crazy.
I have been accused many times or asked if I if I've done steroids, and the answer is no, I have not. That said, I am on HRT because I think in part due to my anorexic phase, my levels were low. And that's why I didn't see a lot of progress my first year, maybe year and a half into lifting. I didn't recover well from workouts. I didn't really see any progress. And I went to my doctor and he's like, oh yeah, your levels are on the floor, bud. Here you go. So I inject once a week, and my levels are within normal range. So I can't rightly claim any sort of enhancement, nor do I feel like I really look freaky enhanced or anything. Hydration, macros, sleeping enough go a really long way. And people are always trying to find shortcuts and hacks and biohacks and shit. No, honey, you got to do the work, and you've got to make the effort to make that happen, because there's no cheating around it. Speaking of supplementation, I've not really bought into supplements. My supplements are a cup of coffee before a workout and creatine. And I do have like a bit of a vitamin regimen, right? Like I take BND for the mood, fish oil, a multivitamin, some fiber, but nothing magical or there's no witchcraft involved.
And I also mentioned that for some people, it boils down to genetics limiting them too. Like some people are just not going to get as big naturally as other people will naturally, and you got to realize that it's a lot of it is genetics.
I've only ever been able to take a pill. I could never like going to the doctor. Like when I had to get my vaccinations, the guy I was with was 5 feet tall, and he just egged on me constantly for being afraid of needles. But here I am, this weightlifter guy sitting there looking over at the tide on the end cap, focusing on that because the doctor or whoever is putting the needle into me. And I'm like, and I just I couldn't imagine having to give myself a needle. So for you guys that have done the injection and give yourself an injection, what was it like the first time that you had to do that to yourself? Because the only way I could feel that I could get injectables, and it's I almost romanticize it a little bit, I hate to admit it, but it's true, is if I were to stand in the kitchen and my muscle daddy were to just give me the injection.
Someone's building a fantasy over here. What the heck?
Look, whatever works, is so long as it gets. But my coach, my muscle, whatever, just give me the injection and coach me through it, explain to me what it is. But I just don't think did you sit there in your kitchen, or how long did you stare at the vial or whatever before you went and started it, and how long did it take for it to become, oh, this is my normal now? So
ultimately, the person that helped me start the cycle was the one that showed me where to do it. And he showed me how to do it on the shoulder on himself, because he was also on cycles, and he's a big bearded muscle guy. He's so pretty. Anyway, but he showed me where to do it on. And then I was really nervous to do it first time myself. And so I was not sure where to do it in the glute because it's either there's like the shoulder, there's the quads, but that's a smaller area, or the glute, right? There's multiple areas, but he's recommended the shoulders or the glute. And so he showed me how to do it on the glute. So he did my glute himself to kind of show me where it was that I should be poking. And so I did it, and that thing is it's like an inch needle too. So it's like this big. So it's not, because to get in the glute, it needs to be significantly longer than the shoulder. The shoulder is a lot shorter. And so he showed me where to do it, and it's right there. And when you're hitting muscle, you just have to really just press hard, and it just goes in, and that's what it is.
I just wanted to be completely honest about all three of these things. They all make me nervous. And I'm speaking only from a medical point of view here because I am a nurse. And so like when it comes to steroids and testosterone, like I understand that there's wiggle room there, like places to make it safe and appropriate. And, like as long as you know the risks involved and all that. The other two make me extremely nervous, both silicone and synthol, because I believe that synthol, like silicone, is also permanent, or it might take months to go away because it's an oil that's being injected into your muscles. But like the silicone, especially, I've said it before and I'll say it again, that is so incredibly dangerous to inject silicone into your body without it being in a case of some kind. Like the reason people get implants from plastic surgeons is because that silicone is contained. It's not meant to leak out. Whereas if you just jab a needle in your butt and start injecting silicone, it's just going to sit there, but it's got nothing protecting it. So like those two things, they make me so nervous.
Yeah, I don't know if I do any injectables myself. My injectable is butter, and I inject it into my mouth. So, that works for me. Except, Cap, the cheesecake story now. So, sometimes we try different things and they don't always work out.
You just gave me a terrible image though, but you gave me an image of the beer injector, but filled with butter.
Oh God.
Listen, don't be bringing that to me on this podcast. How very dare you?
Cap, I think you would immediately throw up if you swallowed that much butter.
Now, Cap, I want to know from you, because obviously you've been very specific about like the HRT. What about you in terms of the injectables?
Yeah, so my first time was terrifying. I was very worried that I was going to do something wrong or get some kind of infection or, but thankfully it's become more routine, and frankly it's a little bit, it's inconvenient sometimes. So I try to make it a nice time of the week. I lock my room, whatever. I play some nice music. And I've got a little spray bottle of isopropyl that I use to disinfect the injection area. And I found taking a needle is a little bit like bottoming, in that you need to take deep breaths and just kind of let things happen. So it's just a psychological side to it. And I was horrified at first. And the first time, even after the fact, I'm like, oh no, I'm sure they're going to die. Something went wrong. But everything was fine. And it continues to be fine, which I'm grateful for.
Maybe that's why I can't get a needle, because for the life of me, I tried to learn the bottom and it was just like, there's just something in there. I don't get it. Maybe that's why I can't take injectables. Maybe that's what it is. You've made it clear to me now what this is for me. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do much bottoming anymore these days. In fact, I identify more as a side, but there's a bit of a correlation there somehow. Maybe psychological. I don't know. It's just a kind of a calming down of things, deepening and slowing of the breath.
I like that. And here we are on Thicc Radio, sharing the love, educating one another on this podcast, as well as you, the dear listener. So thank you, everyone, for your contributions on that front. I do want to open up the floor very quickly, though, because we are approaching the end. If anyone has a particular question for another guest that they want to, now is the moment.
So I actually have been, honestly, this is both for Capy and Dusty. How did you get to the point where you were like, oh, I really like this on myself?
I think for me, it actually took a little bit of back and forth. Well, there was definitely a mental struggle, a mental tug of war between like, do I want to keep going or do I want to lean back down? And there were a couple times where towards the beginning of gaining the belly, like I'm like, okay, I don't know how I feel about this. Like I'm gonna lose some, and then I did that a couple times, and I missed it every time. Like I'm like, oh God, I hate feeling smaller. Like I really need to go for it again. And then I'd go for it, and then I'd be like, okay, this is good. And then going out and getting a little bit of attention about the belly, and it's been more and more accepting lately, has definitely helped. But yeah, I think just time and kind of trying it out a little bit has helped along the way, and then built up confidence about it.
Yeah, for myself, I was kind of in a similar place to maybe you find yourself in for a while. I was dating a guy who was much bigger, and I was the skinny one in the relationship. And then we had a breakup, and I was kind of mentally thinking like, well, I was sorting myself out through that. I was like, well, if I can't have a big teddy bear, I want to be my own big teddy bear. And so I kind of tried it. And like, as has probably come up on this podcast as much as, in any discussion about the community, you can always go in increments. It's not an all or nothing kind of situation. If you want to go up 5, up 10, that's something relatively easy to reverse if you don't find yourself happy or healthy or feeling good with where you're at. So I think it's important to realize that magical changes like you see in the 90s cartoons don't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work and effort, I mean, depending on your genetics, but still it takes a concentrated effort to actually make visual change happen. So I think it's important to just be gradual and be kind to yourself and do a lot of introspection, check in with yourself. Because it's one thing for other people to say, oh, you look great. And it's quite another thing for you yourself to say, I look and feel great.
I'd like to add, so a friend told me about Grommr. I joined Grommr. I had never really cared about having a belly or not, because I always had a belly, and I never thought I'd be able to get myself lean enough to have abs, blah, blah, blah. But if you are going down the path of gaining a belly, as it was said, just gaining like 5 to 10 pound increments, sure, but there's a couple of things that you have to consider. It does affect your ability to like bend and twist and things like that. But 2, for me, maybe not all men, but it does affect my drive a little bit if you get my meaning with my eggplant, as I mentioned earlier. And it can affect even the visual appearance of it, to where, if that's a thing for you, that's something to consider before you gain it. But if you build up your legs and get the massive tree trunks, that also affects, the visual presentation of said eggplant. But it's a matter of, I think when you have the Lincoln log legs, your functionality is different because of how the fat can affect your blood pressure. And, if you're a person that, like you had mentioned, someone grabbed your love handles and you really liked it a lot, maybe that stimulus is all you need. But I know that when I was fattier, my drive was down, and I personally did not like when I started realizing something wasn't the way it usually was. That's just me giving my 2 cents.
Well, listen, one last question we want to put out there to the group. Obviously, we've had some really good chats tonight, I think, about the different points. I'm sure everyone gets asked like 50 trillion questions about like, what do I do to get the most? Like, I'm sure everyone gets like fucking all of that. But like here and now, officially, what is like the one thing that you would say, as in like, no one told me this when I started, I would have loved to have known this when I started, it probably would have helped me out, blah, 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 blah. Just short and sweet, what's that advice for listeners who might be interested in knowing what to do?
A, hit your macros. B, full range of motion on all lifts. If you can't control the weight all the way down, you're not doing the most you can for muscle gains.
Consistency is key. You can't just do it once in a while and expect to get results.
I would ultimately say that don't be intimidated by the gym.
I think for me, a couple things. do what makes you happy. Who cares what other people think? Like, it doesn't matter in the long run. And people that are your true friends will stick around. The other thing, definitely consistency. And as far as lifting, switching up your workouts is essential. If you keep doing the same thing over and over and over, you're gonna plateau and you're not gonna make any progress. And then count your calories. Like, if you're not gaining, you have to eat more. And you probably, if you're not counting your calories and you're not gaining, you're probably not eating enough. So count your calories and make sure you're getting, enough to gain. Otherwise, you're not going to make any progress.
Well, everyone, that's been our episode for today. Oh my God, thank you literally everyone for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure. Where can our listeners find each of you online?
You can find me on Instagram, Dusty_F, on Twitter, Cubby_84, and on Grommr as thiccster with 2 C's, THICCSTER.
You can find me on Instagram, bigerbii, BII. That's how you would spell that. It's all one word.
You can follow me at all my handles, indigothehimbo on Twitter, Instagram, Grommr, and TikTok.
And you can find me at the Captain Barra with underscores in between each word on Instagram, and at sobearcub on Grommr.
Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and beefyfrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and beefyfrat at thiccymouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio or at our website at www.podpage.com/thiccradio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/thiccradio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thethicradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stanley.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.